All content contained in this video is created for informational purposes only. This video is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Seek the medical advice of a physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you heard in this video. Hey, I'm Honeysuckle, and welcome to my channel, Psychotic Experience. In this video, I want to talk about the parallels that I see between my experience with psychosis and the hero's journey. Now, just me explaining these parallels doesn't prove the idea true. It just proves that I see the parallels. It doesn't mean that the hero's journey is proven with this experience. I'm trying to work on what proves this to be true definitively, but I'm not sure that it can be proved definitively. I do know that it can be falsified definitively, and I'll kind of go into that at the end of the video. But when I see this pattern, I feel hopeful that it can be used as a predictor for wellness after a psychotic episode or a psychotic experience. So moving into what the parallels I see are. So to start off, back to the hero's journey video I did last video. The hero starts off in the ordinary world. So for me, I would be the hero or the protagonist of the story of myself. So from my point of view, I started out in the ordinary world. The ordinary world for me is I was living in my apartment at the time, working at a job in the IT field. I was looking for relationships, particularly, hopefully, a boyfriend-girlfriend situation that I didn't really get. I was getting mad at some users or clients for not knowing things. I was smoking weed pretty regularly at some points, and at other points just a few times every other week. I was playing video games with friends. I was going to parks. I was browsing Reddit. My normal daily life was pretty much this. And then I get a call to adventure. This call to adventure came from Reddit. I was looking at some conspiracy-based subreddits, particularly r/c_s_t. On this subreddit, it's kind of like almost like a philosophical, but also conspiracy type subreddit. I'm not sure exactly what they are now. I don't go there too much. But on this subreddit a few years ago, I would say around 2016, 2017, I found someone talk about something called the Law of One, which is a book series or online reading that was channeled, quote unquote, or trans-channeled, however you want to put it, by this group called LNL Research, who channeled some kind of entity known as the name of Ra. The way that it was channeled was they did some kind of ritual, and then this girl was lying down on a bed or something, and then she went into a trance, and she didn't remember what happened during the trance. But when one of the guys asked the girl questions, she would talk in a very slow voice. I don't want to mimic it because it was literally 10-20 seconds between each word, and then they would transcribe that into written word and then eventually present it to the world in a book form as well as a website. So I read all this. There were something in the range of 100-something sessions where they would do the ritual. They would talk to this girl in trance, and then they would transcribe it for later. That was me trying to step into or getting a call to adventure to this special world of magic. In the hero's journey arc, there is usually a refusal of the call. However, in my case, I didn't refuse to go into this special world of magic and spirituality. I kind of just went in there oh, let's find out what this is all about. And so, into the next part of the hero's journey arc, there's the meeting the mentor part. The Law of One book in particular was my mentor it wasn't a person specifically. It was a book, or in my case, it was a website that I looked at. Um, Based on the ideas that I took from the website, I structured certain beliefs of mine based around it, such as like this idea of reincarnation, or this idea that um, we kind of look back on our lives after we die and see how good of a person we were or how selfish of a person we were. And I also got this idea that there might be aliens out there that want to communicate with me, or they're magical beings. There were some other ideas, but those were the ones that stuck out to me that I remember now. So moving into the next portion of the hero's journey, which is crossing the threshold. For me, this is when I actually started studying or reading about and practicing mystical ideas, such as occultism, tarot, looking into synchronicities, and a few other things. I remember in particular one day while I was at my apartment, I was trying to look for occult-based readings, and I bought a book from this guy who was selling like his condensed version of his experiences or something. And I remember buying it and trying to get into like some kind of group, but I didn't really know what I was doing, and I never really got into the group. I remember watching a few YouTube videos or YouTube channels on some occult-based people. I remember one guy who quit his channel. His name was Grand Infinity. I think he had a name before that as well. There was also this guy, Raider Xavier. I looked into his videos a little bit. And I also I remember watching a video by this old dude from like the 80s who did like some kind of ritual with him and 3 other people. Really bizarre, really fascinating to watch just in general. So moving into the next portion of the hero's journey arc, this would be me meeting trials, allies, and foes. This I would say mainly happened over on Reddit. The trials and allies and foes I found on Reddit in particular. I don't want to get into the actual subreddit because people actually know my name there because I was very trusting and thought that I could give people my name and it would be okay. But I kind of regret that. I do regret that now. I also remember on Reddit getting into a lot of arguments with people. This would be a kind of trial. I would maybe disagree with one of the ideas that was posted on Reddit, and then I would try to argue with the person. But I wasn't very kind, but I wasn't necessarily wrong intentioned. It was kind of me wrestling with myself about ideas, but I didn't realize at the time. And I did find friends on some subreddits that would kind of help me with my spiritual practices or mystical practices so that I could use it in my own life. And that went on for, I would say, about 6 months or so. That was like at the start of like mid-August of 2017 into like 2018, beginning of 2018. I also, besides Reddit, another trial that came to me was like my eyes would twitch a lot. Like it would constantly twitch like 4 times a minute or so. It would really suck. It was like, I think it was like a twitch due to stress of like all this like occult mystical stuff and conspiracies, but I'm not really sure. I don't really have it now, but I still have styes in my eye. I get chronic styes, and I have to put a hot compress on them and try to help them go away. It does help a little bit, but not. It still comes back despite me still doing that. But back to my trial. That was something that I struggled with a lot. I tried everything I could to mystically make it go away. I thought maybe the twitches are signaling to my mind that maybe my thought is a bad thought, So if like I was thinking to myself and I would get the twitch in my eye, I would then think that what I was just thinking about was something significant. So it kind of ties into this synchronicity idea of like coincidences happening for a reason. Another trial would be I wouldn't get too much sleep. I think this was in large part due to the weed use that I was doing on a regular or semi-regular basis. It does affect my sleep schedule pretty bad, and I don't get that much quality sleep when I do smoke weed. Um, and I remember sometimes waking up to like shadows watching me, and I remember kicking the where I thought the shadow was, and it was like just the wall. It was really, it felt like I was in a maze, so to speak. But moving on into the next part of the hero's arc, for preparing for the Inmost cave. So the Inmost cave would be me in psychosis, and then preparing for the Inmost cave was like the moments before I went into psychosis. On one particular night, I got very little sleep. On this one night, it was in March of 2018. The past 2 nights beforehand, I hadn't gotten much sleep either. And then on this third night, I called my friend. I'll call my friend P, and I told him that I thought I was hearing voices and seeing things, and he said he felt the same way. So I kind of connected it with him there on this mystical level. And then I'm in bed, and I'm thinking about all these mystical ideas, and eventually I came to the conclusion that I created the people that I was conversing with on Reddit by sending energy into the phone. Really bizarre thought. I also remember a hallucination that happened. I think I talked about this in an early video, but I remember hallucinating phosphenes, and phosphenes are this idea of like, so if you stare at the sun, and then you look away, you see this kind of like shimmery ball thing, and that's a phosphene. That thing that you see in your vision, that's not the sun, but it's when you're looking away, that's a phosphene. But I saw these phosphenes in my room at night on my bed, and they were stable. They didn't change when I would look away. They would like still be over here, but then when I would look back, they would still be right there. Really bizarre. I thought they were angels or something. And that was really a trip, I would say. Very, very kind of scary. And then after that night, I went to work, and that's when like I went into the Inmost cave, or when I first went into psychosis. So that next day, after I hadn't been sleeping for like 3 days, I started to believe any thought that came to my mind. And I think this believing any thought that comes to my mind is something that really triggers my psychosis experiences. So for example, I remember going into work, and then my coworker came in, and I believed that my coworker was God. I told him, "Hey, are you God?" And he's like, "No, man, I'm not God." But that's weird that you would ask me that. And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then so I go onto my day, I do some IT work, and then like I start focusing in on my coworker, who I still think is God, and he's talking to me, and all of a sudden I start interpreting the words that he says in a completely different way. He was speaking normal English. Like I would hear normal English words, but the words that I would hear, I would interpret them vastly differently. So I would hear the words, okay, hey man, the project got changed. The project due date got changed from March to April. But I would interpret that as like, hey, the world is now not going to end in March, or hey, the world is not going to change dramatically in March. The world's actually going to change dramatically in April. I kind of switched the definition for project with the word like major event, but I fully believe that this false interpretation was what my coworker meant. And he said a bunch of other things that I interpreted differently, but that's the one that stuck out to me the most. And it's hard to remember some things when I'm in psychosis, or that were from psychosis. and I'm not sure why. It might be because of the differences in thoughts, but I'm not really sure. It's just hard to remember everything. But then in the middle of the day, of my work day, I think the thought that we're in a simulation. And because I believed everything that was coming into my mind, I fully believed that we were in a simulation. So I could just do whatever I wanted. So I left work, and then I started driving, and eventually I got back to my parents' house because I believed that the girl I first was seeing was pregnant and has a child. And so I told my parents, and they're like, "Yeah, you gotta go see someone." So I went to a hospital for my first psychosis experience. And then this is still part of the ordeal experience. The ordeal lasted pretty much for a few months, so I'm kind of gonna give you the rest of the ordeal. While I was at the hospital, I was still in psychosis for the next like 2 or 3 days, and then I kind of tapered down. Eventually, they let me go at like day 10 or something, and then I left the psych ward, and I decided that I should quit my job. I was still kind of in a like minor psychotic state where I still kind of had thoughts that were not real, that were delusional. So I kind of acted on this idea that I should just quit my job because I should focus on myself for some kind of reason. I'm not sure exactly why I quit my job. But I quit my job, and then like a few weeks are going by, and I get depressed because I don't have a job, and I thought how dumb I was to just quit this job that I had, where I was able to live on my own. And I'm living with my parents at this point after the hospital visit, and I get really depressed. I get suicidally depressed. And I even planned my suicide. I remember wanting to drown myself in a particular lake where some of my other families lived. Really dark stuff. I remember wanting to sleep all the time. Very terrible. It was like I just wanted to not be existing. And so I had a follow-up visit with a general physician in April of sometime, just to kind of check up with me. So I go to the doctor's office, and they start asking me some questions, and my mom was there too, just to make sure that I was like able to express myself clearly. And I remember one time the doctor was asking me questions like, "Are you having suicidal thoughts?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And then they started asking more questions about that, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm having these thoughts. Yeah, I've got these plans. Yeah." And then I just realized, oh, the atmosphere drastically changed, and something's gonna happen now. And they're like, "Yeah, we got to take you to a hospital so you can like not be so depressed." So I was kind of like not wanting to go in because it cost a lot of money to go to a psych ward for a few days. It cost a lot of money if you don't have health insurance, and I mean I did, but also it still costs money, like a few $1,000s with health insurance. So I'm like, I really don't want to go, but they're like, "Yeah, you should go," and I'm like, I can't go because I don't have the money. And my mom's like, "We're gonna pay for it." So that, like, the fact that I had my parents' support with this hospitalization stuff helped me out. The first time I went to the hospital, I paid that myself, and that sucked. But then the second time, my parents paid that, and that helped out a lot. But so I go to the hospital for the second time for my depression. And the first few days, I'm pretty depressed. I'm talking to psychiatrists, working on different medications. And a few days in, I have this dream of like I'm in a maze with like these weird snake things that are trying to eat me, and then it gets more chaotic, and then I zoom out and I see this kind of star looking thing, but it's got like DNA arms and legs and all that. I was taking a journal, or I was writing in a journal at the time, and I drew what the star looked like. It had these weird DNA strand kind of arms. Really weird. I've never seen that symbol before, but it was a star symbol. And then it said to me, "I am God," and then laughed and said, "I'm nothing." And then we kind of like danced in this weird techno bubble thing. I don't know. It felt good. And then I woke up and I saw some like rainbow sparkles like across my vision. And then after that, I didn't like want to die anymore. Like I wasn't good. Like it's not out of the woods yet. I just didn't. I got out of the darkest part of my experience, and that was in this particular scenario. This was the reward. Going back to the hero's journey, this was the reward part of this psychosis, but it wasn't really what I was looking for. By going into this special world of magic and mysticism, the reward in this scenario was like not wanting to die. But what I wanted in the reason that I entered into the mystical or magical world was pretty much so that I could have power. And that's not really, I didn't see that as like a reward that was valuable to my goals. It was more like not dying, and that's a power, but it's not the power that I wanted. So going into the next part of the hero's journey, which is the road back, this took another few months. So I got out of the second hospital at the end of April. I went in at the middle of April. I think it took like 10 days for the second time as well. But so I leave the hospital for the second time, not feeling depressed. And I continue on with my life. I try to get a job. I fail to get a few jobs. And then I see a psychiatrist in the middle of July. And the psychiatrist gives me new antipsychotic medicine called Latuda. And I had a severe reaction to this. I said it in my first video, but Latuda was the drug that made me want to look up. It was like wanting to scratch, but instead of a scratch, it's looking up is the scratching. And I just kept wanting to look up, and it was terrible. And that took the one time that I had to go to the hospital for this one. This is the third hospital visit. Was because I wanted to look up so bad, and it wouldn't go away. Even when I slept, I was in the hospital trying to sleep, and just the pain of wanting to look up just felt so terrible, and I couldn't sleep. And then I kind of went into psychosis again because of the lack of sleep. And eventually it does leave my system after about like 30 hours of being awake. But it was a terrible, terrible experience that I had with this drug. And going back to the hero's journey, this is like the road back. Going back, trying to go back into the normal, ordinary world. There's still some trials to overcome. And that was like, that was like one of the big trials. And then I get out of the hospital for the third time. I got out of the psych ward for the third time. And then fast forward to August of 2018, I go into another psychosis. There were a few other psychotic experiences that I didn't talk about in this video, but this part in August of 2018 is like the resurrection portion of the hero's journey. I remember walking my dog and wanting to talk to people about mystical ideas, and I remember giving a whistle to some child's party at the park because I thought like the child was going to be my next incarnation, and if I give them this whistle, then they'll remember all of my memories. Really bizarre but delusion. But I remember after this last psychosis, I stopped taking all the antipsychotic medicines I was taking, and just decided I'm going to try to stabilize myself as best I can. And so I did. I did stabilize myself. And then in October of 2018, I got a job in IT. It's the current job I have now. It's like a help desk kind of job. So I get this job in October. I meet a girl in October, and my life goes back to normal pretty much. And this is me returning with the Elixir. But I never really got an elixir from this experience. I saw it as like this shitty thing that happened to me, and I just wanted to move on, and I wanted to be done with some of this stuff. But there was still some part of me that wanted to explore this mystical world, and I did go back. But this is the end of the first part of the hero's journey. This is a hero's journey in itself, from middle of 2017 to the end of 2018. That was like a hero's journey in and of itself. And then I have a smaller hero's journey after October of 2018 that I'm going to get into next video, or at least the next single video I do. I've got a podcast planned, or I've done a podcast with another YouTuber that I want to show to you guys. He's also been through psychosis, and we kind of talk about his experiences. But I said at the beginning that I wanted to show you how this idea of the hero's journey being equated to psychosis can be falsified. And so the way you can falsify this particular hypothesis is if after going through this hero's journey and you come back with an elixir or some kind of like knowledge from this whole experience, and you tell people about it, and then you go back into psychosis, then that would prove that this idea that the hero's journey is real is actually false. So after going through the soul circle of the hero's journey arc, you come to the end and you're explaining your story and what you got from it, yet you go back into psychosis, then at that point this hero's journey arc is false, that it is related to psychosis. I probably explained that pretty bad. I find it hard to speak it, but I'm able to write it down easier. I hope you can understand that. If you don't understand that, let me know, and I can try to explain it better. So that's my video. It's pretty long, I know, but it's a big story, and that's just part of it. I left out a lot of details in between that I want to get into later on down the line, but that's like a summary of the hero's journey part of my experience. So thanks for coming, and have a good one.